Mondo cool. That's right, boys. Mondo cool.
Dragon Age 2 is an action RPG set during and after the events of Dragon Age Origins, essentially spanning around 3 years of the champion's exploits in the city of Kirkwall. While this is connected to the first game, it's mostly unrelated and doesn't require you to play through the first one in order to enjoy it. This game was developed by BioWare and published by EA. Graphically, Dragon Age 2 is a bit of a mixed bag. The character models in this game look quite good and show a lot of emotion during cutscenes, which is especially good since you'll be seeing their faces a lot during cutscenes. I mean, this is a BioWare game. However, I have to say that the environments leave something to be desired. They have a rather empty feel to them. The biggest offender is the fact that you have to see the same environments over and over again throughout the game. It's not so bad at first, but by the end of the game, it gets annoying. The particle effects, however, particularly flames, tend to look really good in this game. The game also sports very few FMV sequences that look really great. It's a shame there aren't more of them since they do look really badass. Music in this game is your standard fare. It serves as good background music. It doesn't really stand out or anything, but it serves its purpose. The voice acting in this game, however, is top notch, which is great considering how much talking is in this game. Also, unlike Dragon Age Origins, your character speaks in this game, and since you can play as both a male and a female, both have different voice actors. Personally, I think the female voice actor does a much better job, but the male one doesn't do a bad one. Now, the story in this game is also, unfortunately, a mixed bag. The story centers on the issue between mages and Templars. The mages are being oppressed by the Templars due to the possibility of mages being able to turn into abominations, and also because of the immense power that they wield. Your main character, Hawk, the champion of Kirkwall, is at the center of this issue. Now, I actually feel that this is a very interesting subject to focus on in this game, due to the fact that both sides have good arguments and there is no clear answer. Characters in your group will look at you differently depending on which side that you decide to choose, and it's actually quite interesting. I also like that the story is literally being told, and the game being played out is actually one of your companions retelling the events, which I feel is somewhat unique. Although I felt that there could have been some more unique uses of this concept, as it's only lightly touched upon. Despite this, however, the biggest problem in this game is the pacing, as this game really only has 3 main plot events that occur, and everything else is either a filler or a side quest. This wouldn't be so bad if the side quests were interesting, and granted, some of them are, but not a lot. Another issue is the cast of characters. Now, there are definitely some really great characters here. Varric is a badass and suave dwarf who's essentially your best friend in the game. Bethany, your sister, is a kind but strong and independent woman. And Isabella is a fun, albeit promiscuous, charming pirate chick. However, your brother Carver, an elven slave named Fenris, and Anders, the Grey Warden mage from the Awakening expansion from the first game, are all a bunch of brooding sticks in the mud. I particularly hate Anders. No, seriously, fuck you, Anders. Fuck off and die. There's also Meryl and Aveline, but they don't really make much of an impression, honestly. Compared to other BioWare games that I've played, Dragon Age 2 easily has the weakest cast. They're not all bad, but they're easily inferior, and trust me, I've played my share of BioWare games. Regardless, the core of the main story is still interesting, and seeing characters argue about it back and forth is a nice touch. There are some other positives to mention, such as when you're walking around town. Occasionally your characters will start chatting with one another. Some of the conversations they have range from the aforementioned Mage and Templar issue, interesting backstory, and even some funny banter. Another interesting thing is how you have three main conversation options when playing as Hulk. You can either be righteous, aggressive, or sarcastic. I actually highly recommend that whoever decides to play this game choose the sarcastic route, as the main character will say some pretty funny things. The decisions you make also affect how your companions perceive you, which can either work in your favor or you'll end up paying for it in some way. Now, admittedly, the story in this game is easily one of the weaker in BioWare's resume, but a weak BioWare story is still better than most other games, and while I do have my issues with it, I don't think it's bad. The combat in Dragon Age 2 was completely revamped from Dragon Age Origins. This game is now an action RPG. Combat itself is fairly simple and typically consists of mashing the X button and occasionally pressing the other face buttons in order to perform special skills. The game lets you choose at the start whether to be a warrior, a rogue, or mage, and surprisingly each class offers a pretty different experience. Warriors are all about power and being tanks with high defense. Rogues are quick and dish out tons of damage, while also being able to disarm traps and open chests. And mages, which is actually my personal favorite class to play as, lets you unleash awesome spells that devastate enemies on the field. Each class feels unique and different with their own playstyles. Towards the end of the game, however, I felt the combat started to feel tedious, but by then the game was starting to end anyways. While the combat is shallow and mostly just button mashing, it's actually pretty fun for what it is. There's definitely room for improvement, and some added complexities to the combat would have done wonders, but for what it is, it's actually not bad. Whenever you or your allies level up, you gain 3 attribute points and 1 skill point. Depending on your class, some stats are more important than others to level up. For example, if you're a mage, attribute points into your strength stat is going to do you no good. Skill points, however, are what you use to learn new abilities or make them stronger, which are always different depending on your class. At some point, you will learn specialization points, which also allow you to learn an entirely new skill tree. This is exclusive to your main character, however. You only get 2 specialization points, and there are 3 trees to choose from, so you have to be sure of what you want. The system as a whole is simple and easy to understand, but has enough strategy to it that makes it interesting. However, one of the biggest issues in terms of customization has to deal with your equipment. While you can change the equipment of your main character however you want, you're more limited with your teammates. I'm really not sure why they decided to do this, as it only feels constricting. Other than that, however, the gameplay in Dragon Age 2 is pretty decent. It's nothing spectacular, but it's entertaining. Dragon Age 2 is decent, with some noticeable flaws. I think if this game was called something other than Dragon Age, however, I think people would have been more receptive to it, as the game itself, while nothing great, can be pretty fun. There are some things the game does wrong, but it also gets some things right, and for what it does do right, I feel justifies a purchase for those interested in playing a quick and fun action RPG, especially since you can pick this up for about $10. This has been Shintai, everyone. Take it easy.